Welcome to our video series on advanced Dreamweaver features and techniques. In this video, we'll explore working with forms for your website. As we round out this video series, I'll talk through how to work with forms in Dreamweaver. And forms are anywhere on the web page where you type in information and it's submitted to the website. For example, if you're signing up for an email newsletter, that uses a form. You enter your details into the form, you press the Submit button, and the information is sent to the website to subscribe you as an email subscriber. So what we need to do is insert form, and if you just insert a form by itself, the form by itself doesn't have anything. It's just defining that information within this area will be sent to the website. If we go to CodeView, it just uses the form tag. Okay, back to Design View, and here, if you click within the form, you can go to Properties and make some changes. You can specify the form name, and the form name is your own internal reference for the form. And it's only really important if you start creating scripts that reference the form. But if you just have a standard form, it doesn't really matter what you call it. Action. Okay, this is more advanced, and really it depends entirely upon the type of form. For example, if you're setting up an email newsletter, then the action is specific to the type of software or service you use for collecting email addresses. For example, if you use the popular free Dada Mail to manage your email lists, the documentation for that software will tell you what to include for the action here. Okay, method. Post or get. You don't need to get too involved in this, but again, depending on what you're using, it will specify what you use. I would say that the most common is post. And again, this does get quite technical, and you don't really need to worry about it at this stage. And it does, again, depend on the software or service you're using in connection with the form. Okay, and then you want to start adding form objects. So insert form, text field, text button, checkbox, radio button. If we just quickly add some of these, you can see how they look. Okay, input tag accessibility attributes. Let's just OK that. Actually, what I would suggest is just playing around with these options and see how they look. And if we were really spending time on this, it could take 30 to 60 minutes just to cover all the functionality of forms, because it does get quite involved. Again, this comes back to HTML, and if you do some reading up on HTML and forms within HTML, that should answer many of your questions. For example, radio buttons, grouping, and things like that. And what I mean by that, if we insert form, radio button, and insert another one, and actually we've lost the first one, so let's insert form, radio button again, and let's do a quick preview. So File Save. Okay, here's how it looks by default. There's our text box, and there are our radio buttons. Generally, radio buttons are for selecting one or the other, so how it currently isn't very good. Back to Dreamweaver. What you should do with radio buttons, and again, if you read up on Dreamweaver, this will be detailed. If you give a radio button the same name as another radio button, so this one's called Radio 2, and this one's called Radio. Let's change it to Radio 2. Now, File Save, back to the browser, refresh, and now you see if I click that, because they both have the same name, I can only click on one or the other, but not both, because it's grouped them together. Okay, back to Dreamweaver, and you can choose which radio button is initially checked and which is unchecked. Generally, you would have text next to them. For example, would you like to subscribe or unsubscribe? And then you can just type either before or after it, subscribe, unsubscribe. File save, and again, this functionality would depend on the software or service you're using in connection with the form, because the form by itself does nothing. It actually has to connect to software or a service. So really, you need to choose a software or service first, and then you design the form. For example, there's a very well-known and widely used piece of software which you often get for free with your web hosting called FormMail. And all it does is it allows you to design a form and specify which email that gets entered into the form gets sent to. For example, if you're collecting customer shipping addresses, you can use the FormMail script to have customer addresses, after they've entered it into your form, emailed to you at a certain email address, so you can then create shipping labels from that information. So that's just one example. Back to the browser, refresh, and you see how it's working. Let's quickly round this up. So with a text box, we can put the cursor before the text box and say, please enter your email address. Okay, and of course with any form you actually need a button. So make sure all the elements of your form are within this red dashed line. Then insert Form Button. Okay, if you click on the button, you can change the name, but again, that's just for internal reference. What the value is the text that appears on the button, so you can change this to whatever you like. Click Me, for example, and then Action. Okay, if you reset the form, it resets the form, and I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. It can have no action, or it can submit the form. Generally, I would say you'd have this for submitting the form. And then let's click here, insert Form Button, OK that, click on that button, change it to Reset Form, and Action, Reset Form. OK, file save, back to the browser, refresh, and you can see how the form's coming together. So if I change unsubscribe to subscribe and reset, it clears the form. So please enter your email address, email@email.com, reset form, and it clears the form. Whereas the form would generally be used, they would enter their email address, choose to subscribe, and submit the information. And okay, it doesn't actually do anything because going back to Dreamweaver, going to CodeView, we haven't specified what the form does. So within CodeView, name, again, that's internal, then method equals post, which is the most common method, which means how is the information sent to the website, and then action. Again, I keep saying this, but it's very important. You need to specify an action, or otherwise the form doesn't do anything, and the action purely depends on the software or service you're integrating the form with. So that's how you add and work with forms within Dreamweaver. You can have as many forms as you'd like within a web page, so all you need to do is make sure you click outside the red line, and then you can insert form. And we have a second form so we can have more functionality within the same web page if we wish, that way.